Hey everyone, it's Jen.
And this is Lindsay.
And this is Corpus Delicti. Welcome to our latest series. This is actually going to be about one person. Right now it's going to be about 5 chapters or 5 episodes long, but it's worth it.
Potentially more. And I'm sure you guys have heard by now that our next series was or is Alabama Crimes. And we are going to start off in a way that we didn't anticipate. So, little backstory here. We had a listener named Tracy reach out to us, and she recommended a case, which happens a lot. We gather them, we look through them. But with the Alabama series coming up, this one was in Alabama. And so we were like, well, let's look at it. And we were like, oh, this is really interesting. And it has snowballed and turned into a huge, not only story, but an actual project, which we will talk about at the end of this episode. But this is going to kick off the Alabama series, but it is a series of its own. It's called Road to Redemption, and it is about a man in Alabama on death row.
So let's get rolling. Road to Redemption, Chapter 1, Death Row. Our story begins at Holman Correction Facility at Atmore, Alabama. This is Escambia County in the most southern part of the state. It's about 82 miles up from Gulf Shores. Holman is currently home to 307 inmates. It is also the primary facility for death row inmates, having 170 death row cells. And this is the only one that carries out executions.
In 2016, Holman Prison was said to be the most violent prison in the country. There were stabbings happening regularly, according to inmates, and it earned the nickname of Slaughterhouse. Now, luckily, after an investigation, some new oversight, things do seem to have improved a bit. Just over a year ago, in January of 2020, there was heavy deterioration discovered in parts of the building, which caused a lot of the prisoners to be sent to other facilities. But those on death row had to stay.
One of these prisoners, prisoner Z563, is a black man named Robin Dion Myers. We know him as Rocky. Rocky was convicted of capital murder in 1993 and sentenced to death by lethal injection, meaning he's been there for pretty much 30 years. Rocky says life on death row is lonely. He misses his family. He's got 4 kids, 11 grandkids, and now he even has 1 great-grandchild.
He wakes up early every day. Breakfast is at 4 a.m. Lunch is at 10. Dinner is at 4 p.m. That's crazy eating times. And there's just not much to do. He does have a TV, but to pass the time and keep himself busy, he is what they call a hall runner. So he will bring things to other people in his unit. He'll bring them food, books, whatever they might need. Hey, Rocky, can you go down and grab me something from the library or whatever? And he loves to go to church. They do a church service there, and he loves to sing, which helps pass the time. But when somebody in there is scheduled to be executed, things take an even more somber tone than they already were. Everyone is really quiet. They keep to themselves. The tone completely changes, which is scary. But it's even more scary for Rocky, who has run out of appeals and is awaiting an execution date.
The scariest part? There's a really good chance that Robin Rocky Myers doesn't even belong there. And there's even a stronger chance that he is innocent.
So we are going to get into a little bit of information about Rocky, who he is. Robin Dion Myers, or Rocky, was born on July 16th, 1961 in New Jersey to John and Lorraine Myers. He was the 4th of 10 children. So there was John, Jeffrey, Christine, Robin, which is Rocky, Russell, Crystal, Karen, Kim, Derek, and Daniel. His sister Crystal died of a brain aneurysm at age 11. His brother Kim also died of an aneurysm at age 25, and his eldest brother died at age 45 of cancer.
John, being the eldest, was born when Lorraine, their mom, was just 15 years old. By the age of 30, she had given birth to all 10 kids. Now, John and Lorraine divorced when Rocky was just 8. Rocky and some of his siblings described their father John as an alcoholic. He was often out of work, and they had to rely on welfare, living off of grits, powdered eggs, and powdered milk. They had it rough. I mean, you have this full house of kids, and poor Lorraine, I mean, she was doing the best she can with what she had.
So Jeffrey, who is the second child, he says that their father was really more of another child. He would play with them and stuff like that, but he never really raised them, except for when they needed to be disciplined, which was often done using a belt. Jeffrey also recalls that when he turned 18, John, their father, took him to a bar and got him drunk. They got drunk together. And even Rocky recalls drinking with his father from a really early age, perhaps as early as 14, maybe 15 years old. And from early on, Rocky was always quote unquote different. He struggled in ways others did not. And again, according to John, the older brother, he said, when we were growing up, I didn't want Rocky to hang around with me and my friends because he was slower than we were.
Now, Rocky remembers being picked on for being poor and, his words, not smart. Rocky struggled in school. He repeated the 3rd grade and apparently failed all of the classes the second time around again. Now he was placed in special educational classes. After this, they pushed him through to the 6th grade just so he can keep up socially with his peers. Now, when he was there, he also repeated the 6th grade and the 7th grade. He continues to struggle with memory and paying attention. So his mind is working differently than all of his peers around him. You know, he's struggling daily with this.
By the time he was in high school, he had to go to a school that specializes in students with quote-unquote intellectual disabilities, and he dropped out after 9th grade. After this, he attended a vocational school, but he was removed due to behavior, and he recalls getting into a lot of fights because he was being picked on. Not only did he begin to drink at an early age, but he started using drugs. He started using marijuana, crack, cocaine, Quaaludes, codeine, and Valium.
He also had a difficulty with his bladder control at night, and this lasted until early adulthood. At 19, he met and married Debbie Hood, who was just 17, and reportedly his only romantic relationship. They welcomed their first son, Leandrew, not long after. They eventually went on to have 4 children. Rocky worked, but he had to take off a lot of time for health reasons. He had asthma and severe eczema. It was so severe that outdoor allergens would cause his skin to completely crack or flake off when something rubbed up against him, just like clothing. Now, he would bleed, and this would be very painful, and he was under a doctor's care for this, but it didn't seem to help. He would actually have to wear long sleeves in the heat of the summer to avoid further irritation and infection. Now, remember this. This is a key point here. As an adult, his drug use had turned really problematic. They were in a very heavily drug-ridden area.
His wife's family lived in Alabama, so after some criminal charges for theft, they decided, hey, look, let's relocate, let's be near family, let's try to start over, be where we can get help with the kids, and just try to do better. So this is when the family ended up in Decatur, Alabama in approximately 1990. Now, Decatur is in the very, very tip top of North Alabama in Morgan County. It's located on the Tennessee River. It's about 75 miles from Birmingham, which is where we are. And unfortunately, what was meant to be a move to better himself turned out to be probably the worst thing that could have happened to him.
So we're going to cut to Friday, October 4th, 1991, in Decatur, Alabama. It's in a little bit of a rundown neighborhood, to the point where the locals call it Cracktown. A 68-year-old woman named Ludie Mae Tucker had her cousin Mammy Dutton visiting her home. Now, Mammy was out of town, so when she had come, she had driven there in her own car, and she was going to spend the night with her cousin. The two women had already gone to sleep that evening about 11 o'clock at night. Miss Dutton remembers looking at the clock just before she goes to sleep. Now, Miss Tucker was a widow, and her husband had passed away several years earlier. So it was around midnight. So technically it's October 5th, 1991. Her doorbell rang. Ludi Mae went to the door. She saw a man on her porch. He stated that he had been in an accident and a fight and he was injured. He really needed to use the phone to call his family, and he's saying, "I'm bleeding to death."
So Mamie Dutton got out of bed and she peered through the window outside and saw the two talking. Now, keep in mind, she's woken up by this doorbell. She's in her cousin's home. Ludi was talking to the man through the window or the door right there at the front. So she's like, she's got it. So she turns and she goes back to bed. And she hears Ludi Mae offering to dial the phone number and make the phone call for this man who's saying, "I've been in a fight, I'm injured, I'm dying." Then Mamie heard the man come inside. She says that he was jabbering, just talking really fast, didn't stop, and that his voice was very shaky. At this point, she heard Ludi Mae say something really odd. She said that her husband was in the other room.
Then before she knew it, she heard Ludi Mae yelling. And shortly after this, the man ran into Mammy's room and stabbed her in her side. Now she's terrified. She stayed in her room for just another minute, but when she thought it was safe, she finally came out. This is when she saw Ludi Mae. Ludi is very injured, laying on the couch with the phone in her hand, and she was dialing 911. And this is a phone call that came in at 12:19.
Important note, when Miss Dutton is stabbed in the side, the man then runs out of the house. He leaves the door open, he's gone, and then she walks out and sees Miss Tucker injured. So Ludi Mae was not able to say much on this 911 call because she's in a lot of pain and she's having trouble breathing. But she did manage to tell them that someone had broken into the house. Luckily, there was an officer in the vicinity. He had been out on a suspected drug activity call in that very area. He was just a few blocks away. He had done his patrolling, didn't see much, and he was about to be on his way out when he got this call. So he heads over to Miss Tucker's house. He's there in no more than 2 minutes. That's how close by he is. Dispatch logs actually confirm this. Call came in. He gets there. He reports in 2 minutes. It was very, very fast. He sees Miss Tucker. He says she's obviously very injured. And his name is Jim Tilley, he called for an ambulance and backup. Now, based on what she says, he also put out a bolo, which is a be on the lookout, for a short and stocky black male with a light, possibly white shirt with blood on it. Again, that is what Miss Tucker told him, and also what she told the 911 operator when she called.
Their very first priority is making sure the victims are okay. Ludi Mae kept saying how much pain she was in, but she did manage to tell them about her attacker. In Jim Tilley's testimony, now this came directly from court documents, it reads, "I was trying to calm her down at this point, and she told me it was a black male, a dark black male. And I asked her, I said, 'Can you tell me anything about him?' And she said that he was short, stocky, and I asked Miss Tucker about the clothing. She gasped and squeezed my hand again, and she said he was wearing possibly a plaid shirt with a white t-shirt with blood on it." Now, after saying that, she went unconscious. She is struggling to breathe. She is in a lot of pain. She gave the policeman, Mr. Tilley, lots of information. Plaid shirt, white shirt, blood on it. So think about as much information as she gave. That's a lot of words when you're stabbed and you're bleeding.
So on the phone with the 911 operator, as we said, she had also mentioned a white shirt or t-shirt. She wasn't sure which, and it had blood on it. So the ambulance arrived. They carried Miss Tucker to the hospital. Unfortunately, she died of her injuries. Specifically, one of the 4 stab wounds that she sustained was the fatal cut. So 3 injuries were located on the front of her body, with the fatal wound being in the left chest area. and it punctured both her lung and her heart. It was right in that kind of in-between space where it got both. It's about 6 inches below the top of her left shoulder, and the wound was 1 inch long and gapped to a 1/16 of an inch wide. So it's not a massive wound. When you think of stabbing, you tend to think of horror movies, butcher knife, but it wasn't necessarily like that. Mamie Dutton did survive her injuries. They could tell once they got there that hers weren't quite as bad as Miss Tucker's, so they were focusing on Miss Tucker. Miss Dutton was recalling what happened, and she was taken to the hospital, and she was released 2 days later.
We are going to get to the investigation right after this break. All right, Delectables, let's just cut right to the chase. You see where we're going with this. This is the crime that Rocky is on death row for. We will talk more about how it unfolded later, but right now, off the bat, here are some key points we need to acknowledge based just on the murder of Ludie Mae Tucker and the attack of Mamie Dutton that was just discussed. Now, we haven't mentioned this yet, but at the time, Rocky, his wife, and children lived across the street on a converted duplex, and the duplex only had power on one side. So think about it like this. It's like a one-story stocky building with 2 front doors. Now that's what's going to be a duplex. It is a 4-lane highway in between the 2 houses, but they are across the street from each other.
So this duplex, which is 2 houses that are attached, they had taken out that middle wall. So technically it was designed as a duplex, but it was opened up to them. But that's why there was only power on one side, because there hadn't been anybody on that other side before they did that. So this may not really seem like a big deal. But let's think about this a little more, because we already know that right off the bat that this is Rocky. Rocky's in prison for this. So a few questions that we want to address right off the bat. The man who attacked these victims stated that he was in a car crash and a fight. He needed to use the phone to call his family. He's bleeding. Why would Rocky need to do this if he lived right across the street? And I mean directly across the street. Also, Ludie Mae and Rocky knew each other. Rocky had been to Ludie Mae's house on at least 2 occasions that he remembered, specifically to borrow ice from her. Rocky's family did not have a refrigerator, so it really wasn't unusual for them to need ice for cool drinks. He says that his kids' treat was Kool-Aid, and when they would make Kool-Aid for a special treat, they wanted ice in it, so they would go over and get it. It wasn't all the time. It was just kind of a little fun thing for them.
And think about it like that. It was their treat to have Kool-Aid. And it was a treat for them to have ice in their Kool-Aid.
Right. And so Miss Tucker always waved to him when they were outside. They were neighbors. They did what neighbors do. Now, that's not to say that they were super close. They didn't have cookouts together or anything, but they knew each other.
And I want to interject this. If you were to watch YouTubes on this case, there is one that I haven't seen anything to back this up, that Rocky did go over there and mow her grass from time to time.
That is up for debate. Some say that happened. Some say it didn't because of his skin condition. Keeping that in mind, a few other things. Why would Miss Tucker tell her attacker that her husband was in the other room? Miss Tucker was not married. She was widowed, and Rocky knew this. Again, they had talked. So why then would Miss Tucker not have opened the door for Rocky, seeing him injured and him saying he needs help? But the even bigger question is, Miss Tucker's injured. Her lung is punctured. She's gasping for air. And as Jen said, she spent all this time detailing this man, short and stocky, white shirt, had blood on it. Why didn't she just say Rocky? She saw this man. She described him. Would it not have been easier to simply say Rocky than to struggle and be gasping to say all of these other details?
Or better yet, why did she not point to across the street?
She wouldn't have had to say a word.
It would have been much easier for her to point and say he or Rocky and point to across the street. If it was Rocky, there was no need for her to go into this very lengthy and painful description of this man.
So with that said, how did this happen? What's the backstory? We know Rocky's there. We know that he's in prison. What happened?
So let's get down to the suspect list. Let's get into the investigation of the Decatur Police Department. As soon as Miss Tucker was taken by ambulance, Mammy Dutton was stable, she was okay, and the police began to secure the scene. After they examined Miss Tucker's house, there wasn't much evidence at all, but two things did stick out. There was footprints outside. Now, this is from Officer Tilley, who was first to arrive on the scene. He said, "We were trying to see if there was any physical evidence, like a knife or anything that might have been thrown into the bushes. Without disturbing anything, we tried to look around the house to see if we could find anything." Officer Rogers pointed out on the east side of the house, along the side where there was 2-bedroom windows, there were some crushed down type of shrubbery and footprints. There is a lot of dew on the ground, so they were pretty distinguishable. It appeared from what we could tell that somebody had been standing in a couple of areas around the house there. From there, we went towards the alley, and I didn't go any further than that. He saw footprints. It was dewy. So we have to make the assumption that they were there after the dew fell, but before the murder. That would give you a good timeline of when they were put there. So that would be around the time of the murder. The TV in the living room was slightly pulled out. There were some cords laying down around it. These cords had been pulled, specifically pulled as like the ends were missing, and they were located where a VCR might have been, which Mammy Dutton confirmed. This gave them their first insight to a possible motive of robbery. So the murderer touched the cables. He touched the television to take the VCR, which was a hot commodity in the 1990s, and removed it from the house.
So then they decide to dust for prints. But of course, you can't go through and dust every single thing in the house. That would take forever. So they went based on Miss Dutton and Miss Tucker's story. So they did the phone because they know that the guy tried to make a phone call. They did the front door, the glass door that the VCR would have been behind, things like that. But of course, prints are only good if you have someone to match it to. So immediately, police start going door to door, talking to neighbors. Did you see anything? Did you see anyone? And one of these neighbors was Purcell Yarbrough. Now, they did not talk to him until the next day, but they did start immediately, and they continued. And here is what Purcell Yarbrough said. They came to my house on a Saturday, and that Saturday night, I told my wife I was going to ride around down on 6th and see if I heard anything about the lady getting killed. That's when I went on 6th to my sister's house. I went in and they invited me to sit down, and I sat down. Anyway, we were sitting there talking, and the old lady's name came up. It was so awful the way somebody did the old lady, and as we was talking, she said, "Did anything get taken?" She said it must have been some drugs. She asked if anything was stolen out of the house, and I told her I heard there was a VCR that got stolen. Finally, she said, "You said a VCR was stolen?" And I said, "Yes, that's what I heard." She said, "Come here, I need to talk to you." As we got into the little hallway, my sister told me again, "You said a VCR got stolen?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said it was a RCA. Remember, he has talked to the police. That's how he knows this. She pushed the door open and said, "Look right there." And there was a VCR up under the table. I got on my knees and I pulled the VCR out and I looked at it. She said, "Is that it?" And I said, "I don't know, but this is a RCA VCR." And she said, "Get it out of here. Get it out of here." I said, "Where did it come from?" She said, "I don't know where it came from, but get it out of here." I said, "Who brought it here?" She said, "I don't know who brought it here, but get it out of here. I don't want to get involved."
All right, so Yarbrough is the neighbor. The morning of the murder, because it happened at midnight, a little bit after midnight, police go over to the neighbor's house. They talk. They explain what happened. Yarbrough then goes to his sister's house. his sister has the stolen VCR, presumably at this point. She doesn't want it in her house. So Parcell, people call him Percy, his sister was Annie Sue Crittenden. Now, Miss Crittenden had a house not far from Rocky and Miss Tucker, so it was a very close neighborhood.
It's about 3 blocks away, just to put it in perspective.
It was known as a shot house. Now, this house sells liquor, beer. It's not authorized to do so. And her friends would come by and, she would sell them beer, whatever. It was also what you would call a crack house. A man named Leon Madden, now his street name is Butch. Butch sold crack cocaine out of the home as well. Butch was dating Annie Crittenden's daughter. So the neighbor Yarbrough, Percy, his sister Annie had the stolen VCR. Her daughter was dating Butch, the drug dealer, out of her house called a shot house. Butch paid all the bills. He provided her with furniture. He gave food. He paid all of the utility bills. It was a good working relationship with them. So she let him run his little operation, or I wouldn't say little. It was a good-sized drug operation out of that house.
So he would operate on the front screened-in porch. It was really glassed in. Shouldn't say screened, it was glass. But he had a few friends who helped kind of serve as lookouts for police officers, any untrustworthy customers, anybody that may be up to no good. One of these is Willie Reese Raybon. His nickname is Roadrunner. And Willie Reese, Roadrunner, served as his go-between. If Butch was busy, then Roadrunner would handle the transaction for him. So he's really his right-hand man. He got his nickname, Roadrunner, because he could apparently outrun any police officer, even in a car. He was the getaway man. Now, Roadrunner himself said he couldn't sell no crack unless he went through me. I had to verify they wasn't a snitch or something. And then sometimes he would put the drugs in my hand through me and do the transactions.
Now, on October 4th, the day of the murder, or the evening before the murder, Butch and his crew set up their operation at that house around 11 a.m. But that night, there had been a collateral transaction. Butch had accepted the RCA VCR from a customer in exchange for some crack. Hence, the statement from Percy that we just heard. And that's when he went in and his sister was like, "Get it out of here. I don't want anything to do with this." Percy, already having talked to the police, took the VCR and took it to the police. But how he took it to police is a story within of itself.
So they knew that it was Miss Tucker's because there was an old repair receipt that had the serial number on it which matched. So this VCR had been repaired before they compared it to the actual machine. Plus, we had mentioned it's been yanked from the wall. So investigators start questioning everyone around the shot house, starting with whoever they can find first. They're hoping to talk to Butch because he's the one who accepted the VCR, so he clearly would have seen whoever sold it, right? So in the meantime, they're trying to track these people down, not exactly jumping to talk to the police because there's drugs involved, there's illegal alcohol involved. So in the meantime, an anonymous police call comes in. And this female caller says that on the night of the murder, she saw a man named Cool Breeze in an alley not far from the crime scene. His hand was bleeding, and he had a white shirt with a logo on it. His pants were black, and he wiped the blood on his shirt. When she asked him about it, this Cool Breeze guy, he said, "I got into a fight over drugs, and then I slammed a door on my hand." He asked her for a ride home, which she did not provide. And one important note here is this call actually came in twice. This female called once, she got spooked, she hung up, and then she called back. So she is clearly scared of something because they say, "Hey, what's your name? Would you be willing to testify? Would you be willing to give us a statement?" She hangs up. So she's scared of something, but what she wants to tell them is also important enough for her to call back and say it. Luckily, they are able to track down this caller. Her name was Angela Acklin. They bring her in. get her statement, and she picks Cool Breeze out of a lineup. His real name is Anthony Ballantyne, and Angela Ackland did know Cool Breeze or Anthony Ballantyne. This isn't someone she was identifying from pictures only. She actively recognized and named him.
Then they find the man named Smith. Willie Reese Raybon, which is Roadrunner. Smith and Roadrunner said that Anthony Ballantyne sold the VCR to Butch. So now we have two people confirming that Ballantyne sold the VCR to Butch. Ballantyne was also known, as Lindsay said, his street name was Cool Breeze, but sometimes they just referred to him as Breeze. And in fact, Willie Reese says that Cool Breeze was there a few times that night, so not just once. And at one point, he was trying to convince Butch to sell him on credit. You know, he wanted the drugs, and he said, "Oh man, I'm going to pay you back. But Butch was not about credit. You had to pay for the product when you got it. He never operated on credit.
Collateral was okay.
Yeah, that happens sometimes, especially with like VCRs, which again, 1990s, they were super expensive. But he was not about to take someone's word for it.
Roadrunner Willie Reese recalls, this is a quote, "He was walking off the porch then. There was 4 steps and he told Butch, 'I will be back, man. I'll be back.'" And he did come back. From court testimony, here's what Roadrunner recalls. I'll read the question and Jen will be Roadrunner. So I will be the attorneys. He had a bag with him?
Yes, sir.
What was he wearing?
To me, it was like a white sweatshirt.
All right. Did you observe whether or not he was bleeding?
He had blood on his hands, a little bit on his shirt, and he was sweating really hard.
So finally, they do find Butch because all these other guys are being questioned. They are delivering the message. Butch is like, look, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to talk to him and I'm going to clear this up. So they bring him in and they question him for a while. And he signs a statement saying the man that brought him this VCR in exchange for crack was indeed Anthony Cool Breeze Ballantyne. And Butch also knew Breeze. Now, in his own words, he said that Breeze was not a preferred customer, but he would see him about once a week at least. And he goes on to detail how Breeze was acting. He tried to get Butch to give him crack on credit. He came back with the VCR under his arm. And this is several pages worth of statement here. And it ended with him saying, "Finally, hell, here we are. I'm telling you like it went down. I hate it for Breeze, but I didn't make him do what he did. He's a man. He did what he did if he did it."
Now, there are also some reports of people seeing him in a car in and around that area. One person seeing him cross the street with blood on his shirt. People seeing him cut on his hand. Needless to say, Breeze is arrested just days after the crime at his job. Breeze was brought down and questioned. And we're going to summarize the police report for you. Now, keep in mind, it's not recorded. It wasn't recorded. It's just a summary from the officer, which he wrote on the paper. It does go on to say that they made a specific note about how he would never once ask who he was arrested for murdering, and he seemed pretty unconcerned with the whole thing. He only stated that they should not have done it while he was at work because it was really embarrassing. He laughed several times about the arrest. Officers told him he was being arrested for Miss Tucker's murder, showed him the VCR, and said that they knew what he had sold it for. He responded that, of course, you've got the wrong guy. He has no idea about it, nor had he ever done drugs in his life. They said he was seen at the shot house, and he said, "No, I've never done crack. I've never left my house that whole night." But they said, "But people saw you there. They saw you." And he says, "Well, I did leave my house once, but it was only to walk across the street to a friend's." Again, the police question him and they say, "Look, people saw you at Butch's crack house." He says, "I don't even know Butch."
So they say it again. They double down on him. They say, "Butch saw you there. Not only did other people see you there, this guy that you just said you don't know saw you there." And he goes, "Well, Butch is a liar and you can't believe someone like Butch." Well, now they know he does know Butch. So they say, are you sure you never went there then? And he says, well, I may have walked by for a beer. I can't really remember. So then they say, well, there are people who saw you in a car there that night. But he keeps saying he was walking everywhere. I walked to my friend's house. I walked to the shot house. And he says that can't be true because my car doesn't run. And they're like, okay, well, what's wrong with your car? And he says, well, actually, my license is suspended. That's why my car doesn't run. It doesn't run because I don't run it. I can't run it. So they're like, okay, something doesn't add up here. They go and check the status of his license. It's not revoked, like he said. So they come back and they're like, hey, we just ran it. Your license isn't revoked. He says, well, it was revoked due to an accident. It is reinstated now, but now the car won't run because of that accident. So this is all over the place. You can see it's back and forth. It's changing. It's just a mess.
The cops are having to call him in every single lie, and he's coming back with another lie to make up for the one prior to. He does finally admit that he knows Butch, but that he's never actually talked to him because he doesn't do crack. So they asked him if he would take a drug test. Well, he agrees, and it's positive. It is positive for drugs. And he says, okay, I've done it in the past, but it's been a really long time. Specifically, it's been years. By the way, this is not how it works. It would not be positive after years. Now, see, you're getting the point here. They caught him in a huge web of lies. So it's not looking good for him. And this is only 2.5 hours. This interview ends. He's now in jail, and he's officially charged with murder.
So they also search his home, and they find a laundry basket. In this laundry basket, they find a white sports jersey. Specifically, it's an Oakland Athletics, which is a baseball team, jersey. It has a blood stain on it and a pair of blue work pants. There was also a pocket knife. Now, note, blue pants could probably seem like black pants in the middle of the night, because remember, we have that phone call from who we know now as Angela Ackland, who said he was wearing black pants. And at this point, they're like, we've got it. We've got the clothes. We've got the man. It seems like Ludie Mae Tucker and Mamie Dutton are going to receive justice. That is until November of 1991.
Then in walks a man named Tyrone Elliott. He comes forward stating that he saw a man leaving Miss Tucker's house with a VCR wearing dark clothing. But you know what? It wasn't Cool Breeze. He said it was a man named Rocky. It's important to note that Tyrone Elliott worked with Valentine, Cool Breeze's dad. Tyrone spoke to a private investigator working on Valentine's case, who told him that there was a $5,000 reward that was being offered. So think about it like this. The man who is wearing the clothing that matched victim's statement, he was seen. He had possession of the VCR, sold it for crack. He's in jail, and yet they are still offering a $5,000 reward?
So the reward technically came before that, and they hadn't closed it out yet. So that's a very good question, because essentially, from what I understand, is you cannot receive the reward until the case is closed, gone to trial, and they know they've got the right guy. So here comes this Tyrone Elliott, and they're like, well, he's saying he saw somebody too. We at least need to check it out.
Which I agree, but he has connection to the guy that's in jail, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. There is a personal connection there.
But do they know that at this point? So they bring everybody back in to get everything straight. They're like, look, if we can confirm with these guys that this is what happened, there's like 5 or 6 of them, they're probably more right than this other guy. So Butch comes back, and they're like, we need your help. Here's what we heard from this guy. He said it's a guy named Rocky. Well, Butch is ready to sign another statement, but this one is different. He says that the only reason he signed the statement saying that Breeze sold the VCR was because that's what the police wanted to hear, and it was not true. Now, later on in court, he elaborated on this, and he said, they wouldn't take no for an answer. I'm not a liar, but but I was telling the truth about the situation. I had no choice. Now, this statement said, in part, the statement I gave you previously is true as far as my business goes. All of the other about Willie Reese helping me out and all of that. The part about Breeze buying from me and using regular is also true, but he ain't the one that brought the VCR to me. I told you that after you all put the heat on me. Willie had told what he had told, and that's why I signed what I did. I knew you all knowed about Breeze being over at my place, so I just figured that's what everyone wanted to hear. He elaborates after this, and he starts to insist that from the very minute he walked in to be questioned, he told them it was a guy named Rocky. Now, this is also what Tyrone Elliott says. And he says, look, I told y'all this. I came in saying it was Rocky. I said it over and over. But they had already talked to Roadrunner. They had talked to a guy named Marzell, which we'll get to him in a minute. And their minds seemed to be made up.
All right, speaking of Marzell, a tad later, a guy named Marzell Ewing was also a part of Butch's crew who was arrested for a car theft and gave a statement. Now, at this time, he was 17. He had been working for Butch for about a year. Marzell implicates Rocky. Much more on this is going to come on in a future episode. And Butch actually wasn't the only one. Willie Reese, which is Roadrunner, also signed a brand new statement too. Now, this statement reads in part, the statement that I gave you earlier about Breeze being the man that sold and traded the VCR is not true. Y'all just scared me. You already knew about Breeze that was there and you had a picture of him and all. So I figured that's what you wanted me to say. I really couldn't have gone through with that. I just wanted out under y'all's pressuring and questioning me at the time. It went on to name who actually sold the VCR. The person who now sold the VCR is Robin Rocky Myers.
But why the change of heart? Why would people lie, then change their mind? What's going on here? So Butch and Roadrunner explained it in their new statements. They said they felt pressured. They said the police would not take them at their word. And they elaborated that Roadrunner was mad at Breeze. They had argued that night at the shot house over money that Breeze owed to Roadrunner. So he's like, well, screw this guy. Marzell, though, because remember, we still have this guy named Marzell who came forward when he was arrested for car theft and said it was Rocky. We'll talk more about why he implicated Rocky later in another episode, but Marzell, they find out, was friends with Rocky. He had known him ever since Rocky moved to Decatur, basically. So at this point, they're like, well, he knows Rocky. He's been with him face to face. If he says this, there's got to be something to it. It counts for a lot.
Now, keep in mind, there are still other witnesses that named Cole Breeze crossing the street with a bloody finger, etc. So what the heck is going on here? Were they intimidated by the police in the interrogation to name Cole Breeze? Were these people just looking for a way to cover for Breeze and Rocky was their way out? Did Rocky really sell the VCR? There are so many loose ends. We have barely scratched the surface. So we are actually going to get more into this in the next episode.
A few quick things. We decided to take this on in full like this because we started researching it and we were like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, wait, there's something here. Oh, wait, this is really bad. Oh, wait, somebody has to do something. So we do plan to get some sort of campaign together to write letters and some other stuff. We're going to give more information on that as we kind of iron out some of the fine details. So just know that this is not just a story that we're hoping that we can kind of band together. We're very, very fortunate because for the first time ever, we have reached out to people in this case. We have had the pleasure of talking to Rocky's current lawyer, the current investigator, and there are some other people that we have on the schedule to talk to as well. So we're very confident in what we're bringing you guys. They have actually looked at it. They have helped with it. Tracy, the listener who recommended this, has basically been our research assistant. We talk to her all the time now, and she's given us links and helped us find stuff. And there's just all these people involved because we really want to try to get this out there and make a difference.
And I will say this, the investigator, Sarah, and the attorney, Casey, you guys are going to hear that later. And you're going to hear the passion and the compassion that they have for Rocky.
Absolutely.
It's moving. They have been so wonderful in partnering with us and getting us the documents that we need. We almost have his entire case file.
Which is something we're not really used to. We dig as deep as we can with every case we do, but resources are limited. You can't just get case files on every single case without filing requests, and based on, our day jobs and our lives and everything, that's just not the approach we took. But this one just really kind of called to us, I guess.
Coming up in the next couple weekends, Lindsay and I are actually going to drive to Decatur.
Yep.
We are going to rewalk the scene. We're going to record some of it for you guys so you can actually hear what we're doing. We've got a couple more interviews coming up, and we have reached out to all of the key players, and we'll give you a little bit more heads up. We are now corresponding with Rocky. And
he sent us a letter, which is just amazing.
And I'm not going to read the whole letter because a lot of it hit my heart, and I don't want to share that publicly, what he wrote. But his first 2 sentences was, "I hope all is well with you and you're being safe out there. It's really sad the state of the world right now, but be encouraged. Things will get better. Just endure." He is on death row.
Yeah.
The very first thing he says is, the world is crazy, but know it's going to get better. He's saying that to me, who I'm able to go to Starbucks and get a grande white chocolate mocha, and he is having to eat breakfast at 4 a.m. or he does not eat again until 10.
So full confession here, and you know this, but the day we received his letter, I was having a crap day at work. Really crappy day. I was in a foul mood. I was mad. And Jen sent that to me, and I read the first 2-3 sentences, and there is this man who is on death row, we believe is wrongfully convicted, and he's being positive, and he's telling us to just endure the world. And I was like, holy crap, what am I doing? What is my problem? So it's, I don't know, this has just become very close to our hearts, very important. There is so much more to come. I am very confident at this point. Spoiler alert for you, Jen. I don't think it's going to be 5 episodes. I am currently on episode 3 on the outline, and there's still a lot more to go, especially once we factor in interviews. But there's so much to talk about here. Just to kind of set the scene, every single thing that could have gone wrong in a case happened in this case. It's going to highlight problems, cracks in the justice system, in Alabama, just in humanity. It's going to highlight it every single step of the way.
If you listen to no other episode, listen to the chapter on the trial. Lindsay said we are writing a letter campaign. We are working with the ACLU, and we will be working with his lawyer and the investigator. If you feel so compelled to write a letter yourself, you don't have to. It's not a call to action. If you feel the need to help, we are going to provide you with our P.O. box. Our goal is to collect them and then present them to Governor Kay Ivey. That's up to you. We're not saying please write letters on our behalf. If you feel so inclined, we will give you the tools. We'll give you the resources. We will actually have verbiage posted on our Facebook pages. If you need it, ask us. We'll email it to you. Just know that if you need help drafting something, we will have it already drafted if you want that.
But then again, if, listen to this all the way through and get the details that you feel passionate about. Jen and I have already sent letters to the governor and kind of put it in our own words and.
And so I was talking to my mom about this case, which I never talk to her about my podcast. I just don't because, conversations usually about grandkids and life events that are happening. But for the first time, I was like, Mom, you've got to hear this episode. You've got to research this case. And then she goes, well, Jennifer, just write the Supreme Court. And I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, there's 9 of them now. Just write them. I'm like,
I don't know if they can do anything on the state level or not. We'll have to look into that.
no, but they can kick a hornet's nest.
That's true. That's true. Well, we did. We got caught off guard. We were like, oh, cool, a case recommendation. Oh, look, it's in Alabama. Oh, this is interesting. Holy crap, here we are a month later, and we are only halfway through it on our end.
Oh, on a side note, there's 3 Patreon requests for episodes for the Alabama case. We will get to those.
Yep.
Rocky himself gave me a suggestion, a recommendation.
Yes, he did.
So just let you guys know. But
all that to say, we're in this. It's going to be an interesting journey. There's so much more to come. We need and want you guys to hang with us. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. Before we go, though, we have a few people that we want to thank.
Every month we do a live Patreon feed. And we are so thankful we have new Patreons that could join us. Those Patreons are Monica, Nicole, Tracy, Lisa, and Colin. We really appreciate the support. You know, right now, guys, we are going to use all of that to buy stamps, to buy ink, to buy paper for these letters. That money will not go to waste.
Absolutely. So with that, we will stand adjourned. We will be back next week. We're going to dive into the court case. We're going to dive into statements, forensics, all that. And you're going to want to buckle up because it's about to get crazy.
But until then, Felicia is going to go put on 1 mask, maybe 2 for a few more weeks. And then maybe our state will be lifting this mask requirement. We don't know. Until then, stay safe for you and yours. Do what's best. We're out the door.
Bye.
Bye.